Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Golden State Strategy to Fight Anti-Semitism Zoom briefing. I'm Rabbi Noah Farkas. I'm president and CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles, here with a number of esteemed panelists, including our governor, Gavin Newsom, who's here. Will be joining us. I thank him and the other elected officials who are going to be with us this morning. I just want to lay out what I think is why this is so important. Having the largest economy in the United States, largest state, most populated county in the United States, where we're located in Los Angeles, come up with a coordinated strategy to fight anti-Semitism is really important as a first major step to fight what is this rising tide of anti-Semitism here in California and across the United States. I see every day faculty from universities, students, individuals in the community come into our offices and are just beside themselves with seeing how they feel erased. They feel like they're not part of the community anymore. They sometimes are assaulted physically, sometimes they're assaulted psychologically, and coming up with a comprehensive strategy to fight this scourge of hate and anti-Semitism is a very critical first step. So we at the LA Jewish community and at the Federation very much appreciate the governor taking a huge swing at this. And we look forward to working with the governor and with the state and with the legislature of turning this plan into action over the course of the next months and years to come. It can't be understated that we all know we're in a bit of a budget deficit, and the idea of putting a plan in place like this is saying that at some point the budget matters a little bit less than the people who live in the state. And so I just want to express my gratitude to the governor, to his team, and to the legislator who is supporting this effort. It's my pleasure now to turn it over to Gregory, the head of the Jewish Community Relations Council of the Bay Area, a good friend, and a wonderful leader of the Jewish people. And again, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rabbi Farkas, and good morning, everybody. Great to see so many of you with us from up and down the state, and for taking time out of your Tuesday to be with us. We are here to have a really important conversation about the state of anti-Semitism in the largest state in the union and how we all need to come together to address this, from the public sector, the private sector, the nonprofit sector. It's going to take all of us to address this scourge, and we are grateful to have this public-private partnership with the governor and his staff. But you're not here to hear from me. You're here to hear from our experts. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our three panelists: the Deputy Chief of Staff to Gavin Newsom, Jason Elliott; the Executive Director of the Jewish Public Affairs Committee of California, David Bocarsly; and the CEO of Jewish Family and Children's Services of San Francisco, Anita Friedman. To the three of you, welcome. We're going to dive right in. There's a Q&A function. Please type in your questions. We'll have some time for audience questions towards the end. And then following our panel, we're going to hear from the two co-chairs of the Legislative Jewish Caucus, Scott Wiener and Jesse Gabriel, who will introduce towards the end of our hour. So without further ado, we're going to start with David. David, over the past 6 months, you've heard from our JPAC coalition organizations and me, I call you in the middle of the night sometimes, about how spiking anti-Semitism is impacting our collective work in the communities that we serve. Can you paint us a broad picture of how you, as the head of JPAC, are viewing this moment for our community?
Yeah, thanks, Ty. Well, our community has really felt rocked over the last 6 months. For so many of us, our hearts are in Israel, but we're all feeling fear and anxiety of skyrocketing anti-Semitism here at home. JPAC serves as the unified voice of California's Jewish community to the state capitol, meaning it's our job to be the Jewish community's advocates at the state level. And in many ways, it's the state government, not always a federal government, that has the greatest ability to ensure the safety and security of the Jewish community here in California. We're seeing anti-Semitism in schools, campuses, synagogues, communities, and online, and the state creates policies that impact all of those parts of our lives. Immediately after October 7th, we knew we needed to lean on our allies and in our state government. Unfortunately, we've been building strong relationships in the legislature for a long time. And sure enough, within days of October 7th, we reached out to our friends, and over half of the state's assembly members and senators put out statements of support for Israel and for the Jewish community. We also partnered with the Jewish Caucus, JCRC, and JFED LA to bring 7 legislators to Israel and the Gaza border a few months ago. But perhaps most importantly, we knew we needed a lot of support from Governor Newsom. And the governor has been such a dear friend to our community throughout his tenure. Under his leadership, the state has directed over $300 million to our top priorities, including $155 million to the nonprofit security grant program, a program that never had more than $2 million annually before he took office. And beyond that, he signed dozens of our priority bills into law and has been a tremendous ally on ethnic studies. And immediately after October 7th, that steadfast support continued. He unilaterally added $20 million to security grants and $10 million to local police departments patrolling houses of worship. And he took an emergency trip to Israel with a plane full of aid. He met with hostage families and survivors, and he spoke publicly about his experience. But despite all of that, we knew it was still important for us to set up a meeting with him and essentially say, thank you for all you've done. Can you do more? And so we did. And he took the meeting and we basically said, look, there is a whole of society anti-Semitism plan at the federal level. The state has all this influence over these core aspects of our lives and our community is hurting. We need a similar comprehensive plan at the state level. And he said yes. And Jason can speak more to this in a minute, but he essentially directed Jason and his team to get working on this right away. And we and the Jewish Caucus remained in regular communication with Jason as they developed the plan. We provided a lot of feedback and they were incredibly receptive to it. And we're proud of the plan they put together. It does a great job at combining proactive actions, protecting existing programs and creating new ones, and really working to counter anti-Semitism in so many parts of society where we're being targeted. Of note, in addition to creating a robust policy roadmap, this plan also protects our major budget wins. And that's a big deal because the state is facing its biggest budget deficit since the Great Recession. And so many of our partner organizations are worried about cuts to services. But these items are now not at risk because they're in the plan. And true to form, security grants awards were announced just last week after the plan was announced. Of course, the plan's announcement is a major milestone for our community, but there is still a lot of work to implement these initiatives. So we'll remain in close contact with the governor, with Jason, and their team to review the different elements of the plan and offer advice as they are rolled out. And I just want to add one more quick note. This morning, our partners at the ADL released their 2023 audit of anti-Semitic incidents. The results are if not unsurprising. It's nearly a 2.5x increase above last year's already record numbers, with most incidents coming after October 7th. But perhaps the most poignant part of the announcement was the call to action in their announcement email. They are calling on all governors across the country to create their versions of a Golden State Plan.
Thank you so much, David. We'll get back to you in a few minutes. Jason, thank you for being here, for representing the governor. You've been a longtime friend and partner of JCRC, JPAC, and all the organizations here. We appreciate you being with us. When we met with you and the governor and explored the idea of putting this together, we were looking at President Biden's national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. And when we put it on the table, the governor immediately said yes, emphatically. And he's been a longtime friend of the community, of course. So can you give us a look, the insider scoop, as to how this came together on your end, working across different departments and across the administration? And if you could break down the plan for us, we'll dig into different elements of it in a few minutes, but we'd just love to hear how this came together from your perspective.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks for putting this together and thanks for hosting me here today. I know a few things. One of the things I know is that you're never supposed to contradict a rabbi. I think he may have mentioned, though, that the governor was going to be joining on this Zoom. Unfortunately, you got me, which is like not even a good second place. It's like a sixth place ribbon, but you got me. So anyway, I apologize. And I've violated one of the core lessons, which is never contradict a rabbi. So Ty, thanks for the question. And again, thanks for the couple hundred people who have joined this morning. So there was really a sequence of events, beginning with October 7th, which need not be recounted. And in the hours and days afterwards, the governor heard directly from a number of his friends and allies in the Jewish community about the importance of taking that trip to Israel that David mentioned in his comments. And we scrambled and we hopped on a plane and we flew to Tel Aviv. And we spent, I was with him when I say we, me and another colleague went with us. We spent a really harrowing number of hours, about a day, on the ground in Tel Aviv. I know Anita has been to Israel about 45 times since October 7th. So, that's, we can't hold a candle to Anita's leadership, but the day that we spent there, meeting with both Israeli government leaders, military leaders, but also IDF soldiers, and also some people who were not affiliated with the government who we happen to know, who shared their stories with us. It was a very moving series of events for the governor. And, I'd encourage you, if you haven't, to take a look at the statement that we issued. He dictated that statement as we were on the plane, leaving Israel that night. So to get a sense of where his head and emotions were at coming out of that meeting. When we returned to the United States, the very, very first meeting the governor had, even before he met with Jewish leaders or any community leaders, was with the heads of all of the segments for higher education in this state to talk about campus climate. And I know that's something that we're going to want to touch on a little bit later, I imagine. But just to give you a sense of how impactful that trip was for him and how he wanted to make sure that in California, members of the Jewish community felt protected and connected here back in our home state. So the meeting with the Jewish leaders, of course, occurred, as has been referenced. And among the things that the community leaders asked the governor to do was to consider a Golden State Plan to combat anti-Semitism. And we were happy to get to work on that. And I think it was an opportunity for us to point to a lot of the things that the legislature and this governor have done in the last few years, even before October 7th. We're not new to this endeavor. And so being able to put all that in one place, but also make some additional commitments of things we want to do going forward was really important. Putting it all in one place and calling it out. I think the first line, or among the very first lines of the Golden State Plan, just simply states that Jews in California are about 3% of the population, but hate crimes against Jews or anti-Semitic hate crimes constitute something like 62% of all religious-based hate crimes in California. So 3% of the population, 60 some odd percent of religious-based hate crimes. So this is clearly something that needs to be called out specifically and directly. And I think that was a really important statement to make, and we were proud to do it. And as was mentioned by David, we were in conversation with community leaders all throughout the drafting of the plan, and we appreciate the support and guidance that you gave us throughout that process.
Thanks, Jason. Now let's drill down a little bit on certain areas of this, and who better than Anita to help us talk about education in the plan. You sit on the Instructional Quality Commission, the IQC, appointed by the governor, which advises the State Board of Education on issues around curriculum and instruction. Can you speak to where we are right now with the state of K-12 education? We've already gotten a lot of questions about this in the chat. As it relates to ethnic studies, world history, how do you view this moment around this, and how do you feel that the Golden State Plan can help us address some of the challenges of anti-Semitism we're having in the classroom? Unmute yourself, please.
See, thank you, Ty, for your leadership and for your partnership in working on this, and special gratitude to Jason. The governor has been a longtime friend and a supporter since he was mayor of San Francisco, and I worked with him often there, and also with Jason. And Jason, you have been really a champion and taken this very seriously and moved this forward, and you deserve a lot of credit for the work that you've put into this. So we're grateful. The situation of everyone's mind. And I think that's because there are many fronts that we're dealing with regard to anti-Semitism, because the whole country has been filled with tribalism and hate among various ethnic groups, and the Jews are among them. The ethnic studies issue is of critical importance. And I think it underscores the fact that of all the various fronts that we're working on, the core front, the core fight, is for the hearts and minds of children. If we don't properly address how we're raising our children, it's going to be very difficult for us to live in this country in the next 20 or 30 years, is my view. So I think we've been really focused on dealing with the issue of the hearts and minds of children, because I think also many of our adversaries have made a strategic decision to move the fight from the campuses, which continues, to the high schools and the middle schools. And so we need to also attend to the high schools and the middle schools and what's being taught. I want to mention just 5 areas briefly that are addressed to one degree or another in the Golden State Plan. legislation, enforcement, content, teacher training, and teacher certification. Legislation. There are existing guidelines that are protect minorities, including Jews, and then there are new guardrails and guidelines which exist or will be introduced that are critical. But we cannot solve this problem through lawsuits. This is not a lawsuit issue. That's one element to try to stem the tide and stop people from doing discriminatory things. But if we have legislation, we also have to have enforcement. We have to increase the enforcement of our existing and new regulations with regard to guardrails on what's taught in the schools. That includes enforcement on the part of the California Department of Education, which needs to be shored up and develop the capacity to respond to complaints much more extensively than has been true up until now. And we also need the Attorney General to be much stronger with regard to enforcement. On my third issue, which is content, I think many people know that the original version of the ethnic studies legislation was rejected because it was discriminatory, anti-Semitic, and anti-Israel. And we are very pleased that it's not legal to teach that content. We've developed a model curriculum, which was unanimously adopted by the State Board of Education. And by the way, and many people who are interested in this, the model curriculum includes the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. So we need to make sure that the model curriculum is the anchor for what is being taught with regard to Jews as part of the whole ethnic studies effort. The ethnic studies effort to teach every child their story, for every child to know their history, to know what the differences are among us, but also to know what our similarities are, is what's really required in order to create a culturally competent classroom. And teaching the Jewish story among the story of all the different groups is an imperative. To do that, you have to have teacher training. And so we will be expanding teacher training to give people, teachers, the skills they need and the information they need in order to do this. And we have to set a standard, which is my fifth point, certification. We have certification through the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing, which is a very important function of the state with regard to math, science, other subjects. There needs to be certification for ethnic studies teaching as well. And so that is, I think, a very important element in our whole strategic plan for how to teach children the truth and inspire them and educate them and help them feel good about themselves and also feel connected to others. That's the way you create a decent society. So that is our strategy with regard to ethnic studies, broad brush.
Thanks, Anita. Let's stick with you, and we're going to go back the other direction on the panel. You also sit on the Governor's Council for Holocaust and Genocide Education, something that's also detailed in the plan. Can you speak to the unique importance right now of Holocaust education in our schools and how the plan furthers this?
Right. Well, but Holocaust education is part of the whole issue of what we're teaching our children in the schools. Holocaust education, properly taught, is anti-Semitism education. I'll mention 4 points on Holocaust education: what our goal is now, what the Governor's Council is doing, the research that we're doing, and how we're training teachers. With regard to the goal is that every child in every school district, in every county of the state of California, which is 2,000 districts, including charter schools, will be taught Holocaust education, but different. It's not Holocaust education that was taught in previous generations about what happened in Berlin in 1939. It's Holocaust education, meaning who are the Jews? What is their story? What are their contributions? Where is the Holocaust in the arc of Jewish history? What does contemporary anti-Semitism look like? And why is it in all of our best interests to work together to counter that form of hate? And anti-Semitism is its own thing. It's not like racism, it's its own thing. Children have to understand that, and they have to feel it in their hearts and in their minds. That is the goal of Holocaust education, and the governor and the state of California have been in the leadership because I think all of us understand that as California goes, so goes most of the nation. Most states throughout the country are calling us to find out where California is, why California is so advanced, what are we doing. Towards this end, the governor established his own Governor's Council on Holocaust and Genocide Education. It includes leadership from throughout the state who are the luminaries and the key providers of this kind of education, Holocaust and genocide education. It stitches together all the various groups that have a genocide story and identifies both the differences, what is different about the Holocaust and what's unique about the Holocaust in human history, but also what are the universal lessons that all of us can learn. So it's bringing together all the different groups. The Governor's Council is charged with elevating Holocaust education, which is, as I've said, anti-Semitism education to the entire state. Towards that end, the governor appointed me, appointed the Attorney General to bring in the legal division. Rob Bonta appointed Tony Thurman, Superintendent of Public Instruction, and also appointed Senator Stern, representing the legislature. So it brings together the private sector, the legal sector, the administrative sector, the legislative sector in one common effort. One of the first things we're doing is figuring out what is actually the state of Holocaust and genocide education in the state of California now. We were given funding by the state, which is also the first in the nation, to conduct a study. We have the preeminent research firm in education, WestEd, working with us. 84 researchers are assessing what is the state of this kind of education in California. We will be issuing a report and recommendations to the administration, to the legislature, to the Department of Education, and to California and the country, probably early November. And so that will be widely available, and that will be the basis for moving forward. Lastly, in order to teach the subject matter, again, you need to have competent teachers. The state created the Teachers Collaborative on Holocaust and Genocide Education. It's a teacher training program, extremely well received, very popular. We will be training 8,600 teachers to start with in the first 36 months to reach 1 million children who will be competent in teaching this subject matter. That includes ethnic studies teachers, history teachers, social studies teachers, all coming together to learn best practices and how to teach the content. And lastly, we have created a statewide website where all of this content on Holocaust and genocide, best practices, curriculum, brings teachers together in order to elevate their capacity to really effectively teach the subject matter. That's how we will change the hearts and minds of California's children.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you for leadership on that issue. Let's move back to Jason and let's switch gears a little bit. Move into community security, something that all the rabbis watching and institutional leaders like us are deeply concerned about. We've had to dedicate a lot of attention and resources to this, but we're grateful that the state just awarded the latest round of nonprofit security grants to faith and community institutions up and down the state. Can you speak to the importance of this program, the recent actions of the governor around this, and the decision to put this into the plan?
Sure. And thanks for the question. So going back to October of 2023, before the governor left for his trip to Israel to witness what had happened abroad, he thought it was really important to do something meaningful, not symbolic, to address the actual fear of physical violence that people in California were feeling. As a consequence, and as you just mentioned, Ty, the governor and the legislature moved up $20 million of nonprofit security grant funding that was planned to happen later, and we were able to move some things around and address those needs urgently and in the moment that was needed. Paired that with another $20 million from a federal pool of money for this, and we're able to award $40 million. As you mentioned, those awards just went out a matter of days ago. We used a scoring rubric that Assemblymember Jesse Gabriel, who I think is joining the Zoom later, codified into law. And so thanks to him for his foresight and leadership on doing that, we were able to work with that sort of scoring rubric to make sure that these funds arrived at the places they were most necessary. It was mentioned obliquely, but let me just underline it. In the days after October 7th, when everyone was very frightened, myself included, for what that meant in terms of violence here at home, The governor added $10 million from a different pot of money to pay for law enforcement reimbursement for overtime activities for uniformed law enforcement, local law enforcement, to provide security to faith institutions of all stripes and houses of worship, places where we all feared there could potentially be violence. And thankfully, I will say this in retrospect, because you never want to jinx the future, but in retrospect, we really didn't see a surge of violence at home in California after October 7th, which I think is a testament to a number of things. The relatively inclusive society in which we live here in California relative to other places. We have a lot of work to do. Many of these investments that I've just detailed, I think all of these things went into it. Leadership from various communities to try to bring people together in a positive way, as opposed to stoking fear and violence. So there were a lot of factors that went into that. But I think it is really a combination of all those things. State government can provide money. The governor can provide rhetorical leadership, as can the legislature. But ultimately, it falls to community leaders, prayer leaders, faith leaders, lay leaders to really move communities forward and not create division. And I think that's everyone's enduring responsibility. And we will certainly continue to do our part and are guided by including people that I'm on the Zoom with about what we can do to do more. But really, at the end of the day, it really is about people protecting each other, respecting each other. And that's the fundamental core of what's going to keep us all safe in community.
Thanks so much, Jason. Can I just ask a short follow-up question? We have a budget. I think a lot of folks are less familiar with how our state government works, and we have a big budget deficit this year. And I don't think folks maybe understand that the commitment to put this in the plan is an assurance. So can you just speak, big picture, this isn't necessarily specific to the Golden State Plan, but you have a budget deficit this year. What does that mean for how we should be thinking about advocacy as a Jewish community?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. Thanks. So the way that California structures its revenues, and I apologize for anyone for whom this is very basic information, we have a very progressive tax structure in California. We're proud about that. The wealthier you are, the more you're earning in capital gains, the more you're paying to move forward all these priorities that we have in California. We're proud of our progressive tax structure. It has a consequence, which is that it's very lumpy. Much of our revenue that we derive every year for the annual state budget process, so we budget year over year with a 3-year look ahead, is really derivative from capital gains and personal income tax, which, as I just mentioned, is very dependent on the wealthiest Californians paying their fair share. So what that means is during the pandemic, when wealthy people were doing very well, we had budget surpluses nearly $100 billion a year. Against a total budget of about $300 billion. So the surpluses were very large. What we did with those surpluses was fill every single reserve we had, pay down a bunch of liabilities, and really work to shore up our fiscal house. And we also did a bunch of one-time spending. The idea is you pair one-time surpluses with one-time spending, so you're not creating ongoing expectations for funding that we cannot fulfill. Okay, well, that's the up. Then there's the down. And right now we're facing so we had a deficit last year of 30 some odd billion. We're facing another deficit this year of 30 some odd billion. And we're looking to close those deficits through a combination of deferrals and reductions to different programs. I would say for the Jewish community, whether the budget chairs are two members of the legislature who are going to be joining the Zoom in a matter of minutes, Scott Wiener and Jesse Gabriel. So I think, in terms of advocacy, you probably have never had, as a community, a better ability to pick up the phone and call those members, because in addition to being the budget chairs, they are also the co-chairs of the Legislative Jewish Caucus. So there's really some overlap there that I think will benefit the community in terms of that advocacy. Now, all that said, we are in a multi-dozen billion-dollar deficit, and that's going to require very difficult choices. Those choices are presently being presented to the governor, so I don't have anything that I can share at this point. But I will say this is going to be painful. There will be cuts to programs that we all hold dear. Obviously, you've mentioned, Ty, that there are certain things that are stipulated to in the plan. We prioritize those things, but we are not the only branch of government. There's those guys too, and they're going to have their own priorities as a balanced budget, and the governor will sign a balanced budget before July 1st, but there will be cuts. And there will be cuts that none of us want to do. And none of us joined public service to reduce social services. That's not why, at least on the sort of Democratic side of the ledger, why we got into this business. But when you are in the up time, you're able to make major investments. And when you're in the downswing, you have to make hard choices. And unfortunately, we're in the downswing right now.
Thanks, Jason. I think it's really important for everybody that's learning and leaning into this to understand that that's the environment with which we're working. So the governor's commitments to these longstanding programs is a win that we should be celebrating right now, in light of the challenges that Jason and the governor are facing. So let's move to David, switch gears again. Let's focus on higher education. We've also dedicated significant time to higher ed, working with the UC Board of Regents and the CSU Board of Trustees. I've spent so much time on the Berkeley campus, people think I'm a grad student or a professor. So we've all been investing a lot of time in this. Can you reflect on where we are right now in higher ed, David, how JPAC has stepped up, and how the plan addresses many of the very acute concerns we have on our college campuses across the state?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Gosh, it has really been a tough time to be a Jewish student on campus. And I got to say, it takes a lot for me to say that. I was UCLA student body president when BDS emerged as a statewide campaign. And I remember constantly telling parents how it still felt safe and welcoming to be a Jew. And in my case, a visible kippah-wearing Jew on campus. I think it's easy to read headlines and fear for your child's safety. And since graduating, I always make it a point to check with students to see what life is really like on campus. And I have to say, since October 7th, we've had the chance to talk to a lot of students, to faculty, to Hillel professionals, and their experience on campus is just not the empowering and safe one that I felt as a student. We're constantly hearing how students are feeling intimidated, bullied, harassed, and in some rare occasions, victims of violence. Many students have reported feeling the need to hide visible signs of their Jewish identity, and others have shared that the fear of being a Jew on campus has inhibited their ability to succeed in the classroom. The ADL reports that anti-Semitic incidents on campus actually increased 2,000% in the 5 months after 10/7 compared to the same period a year prior. This just isn't acceptable. Now, we're as interested in protecting First Amendment freedoms as much as the next person, but free speech does have limits, and there needs to be an appropriate balance of cracking down on hate speech as we protect appropriate forms of free speech. So we're working with the Jewish Caucus on 2 major bills that strike the right balance of protecting Jewish student safety with First Amendment freedoms. One is a bill we're working on with Senator Steve Glazer about strengthening campus codes of conduct policies to better address incidents of harassment and intimidation. And the other is a bill with Assembly members Laura Friedman and Josh Lowenthal that would require anti-Semitism training to be PI trainings. In recognition of how big of a fear this devolution of campus climate is, both of these initiatives are alluded to in the very first item in the Golden State Plan. In that item, the plan puts out an explicit call to strengthen higher ed codes of conduct, and it announces $7 million in UC funding that will, in part, develop educational programs on understanding anti-Semitism that would be incorporated into DEI and other trainings. So these parts of the plan both stand on their own, and they add weight behind our work on the legislative side. And there are a few other relevant items that I'll mention quickly for the sake of time. The plan commits the governor's office to regular meetings with university administrators related to incidents of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. And it shares that the governor already met with and then wrote a letter to the heads of our higher education systems to encourage stronger action in response to the surge in incidents. It also uplifts a Department of Justice legal alert providing guidance on balancing students' freedom of speech with schools' obligations to prevent discrimination. And then there are a number of initiatives to increase reporting and to help address tensions on campus through mediation and cross-community collaboration programs. There's a lot there, and given that the climate isn't showing any signs of cooling, it's certainly needed.
Thanks, David. I want to give Jason a chance to weigh on this also. You know, we as a community have been having dialogue with the heads of the different systems, heads of different campus chancellors, presidents, but I'm curious how you and the governor are having these conversations, what you're asking them for enforcement. And I just want to bring in one of the common Q&A questions we've gotten, which is there's a lot of questions around where's the line around free speech and anti-Semitism. So I'm hoping you can incorporate that and how you and the governor see that issue into
Yeah,
your.
sure. Well, it's a hard one for me. I'm not a lawyer, and this is a challenging question that is, one, a question of perception, but two, a question of law. And I don't want to talk about something that I'm not qualified to talk about in terms of where that line is. But also, on the other hand, campuses do have student codes of conduct. And so I think, as part of the discussion we had around releasing the Golden State Plan on anti-Semitism, it really was about calling on the universities and colleges, the public ones, at least in this state, to do more with those codes of conduct. And whether that's legislative or whether that's something that they can do on their own volition, I think that remains to be seen, or both, by the way. So, look, these are campuses. There are free speech rights. They are public campuses. Those are public spaces. So it's hard for me to answer that question. But I also know that those are communities, and those communities have rules that govern how those communities want to function so that everybody can feel safe on campus. And that's not happening, right? I was sent a video of something that happened on a campus where there was a demonstration, and the demonstration included, I think it was an inflatable pig, and in one hand was holding Israeli flag, and in the other hand was holding a wad of money. I might be getting that a little bit wrong, but it was basically that. Look, that to me is, and I think to many, is an embracing of decades or centuries old anti-Semitic tropes. That feels to me like hate speech. Is it protected speech? I will leave that to others to decide, because I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a litigator. I'm not a First Amendment litigator. But look, I think there's a difference between standing up and screaming as loud as you can that you think what Israel is doing militarily is wrong, or that the U.S. should or should not be supporting certain policies. And the governor strongly defends everyone's right to protest peacefully and within the bounds that doesn't include hate speech. But to me, that those kinds of tropes really do cross a line. And the question then is, what can campuses and segments do to strengthen those codes of conduct to make sure that Jewish students feel, and faculty and community members feel safe wearing a kippah on campus, or participating in a pro-Israel demonstration if that's what they choose to do. And I think it's suffice it to say that's not happening enough on campuses, which is, and I'll close here with my answer, but it's part of the reason why the very first meeting the governor had when he came back from his trip was with segment leaders. So basically what happened is we went to Israel, and then we continued on and did another trip for a few more days in another part of the world. But that was really the time when, we were watching what was happening on campuses, because we still had our, the internet with us. So we were able to see what was happening on campuses, and really fearful about increasing violence. And there certainly have been acts of violence. And there certainly has been a climate that has shifted. Look, when I was still in San Francisco, I was on the SF State Hillel board. So, David, kind of similar to what you were talking about when you were at UCLA, seeing at a very ground level what that looks like at SF State. This was in the mid 2010s. And knowing what campuses can become unless you sort of very actively try to check that. And I think that's really where the governor's head was coming back from that Israel trip, and post October 7 was really trying to call that out, name it, and say this is not acceptable.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, we see what happened with Dean Chemerinsky at the Berkeley campus. We're seeing it's deeply disturbing, and I think this environment's deteriorated over the course of decades. It's going to take us time to unwind this really systemic problem across our campuses, and thank you for your partnership working on these issues. Let's move into law enforcement and hate crimes, and there's sort of two sides to this, Jason. And then there's also the enforcement side. How are we enforcing our laws? So we've obviously seen a surge of anti-Semitic incidents. You talked about us having the majority of religious-based hate crimes. And in San Francisco alone, Jews are now the most targeted group, the city that we represent at JCRC. And we're among the most targeted statewide. So how does the plan address this alarming situation? We've gotten a lot of questions about this. And how can you work with the Attorney General and his office around enforcement as we're seeing these incidents climb?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I think, not a lot of, but a number of the initiatives that we're proud of in the law enforcement space have been mentioned already. So apologies if this is a little bit repetitive, but in the plan, we do call out the DOJ's hate crimes coordinator. And I think that that's a really important Attorney General Bonta has been a very good partner in this work, and the hate crimes coordinator at DOJ, I think, is an important office for them, and creating a place where you can funnel incidents of hate. We have a California versus hate. It's an anonymous hotline. They just told me the number 8338 no hate. So that's an anonymous tip line for witnesses or victims of hate crimes to be able to report those things to the state so that they don't go unreported, because the first step to addressing them is knowing that they occurred. I think we were proud to participate and help organize a summit that happened in January with the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District, I believe it was, and the Attorney General's office around anti-Semitic incidents and hate crimes. I think that there's another important thing here, which we talked to Jewish community leaders about in crafting the plan, and I'll just mention again, which is improving hate crime reporting and enforcement at the local level. So there's the state apparatus, the state DOJ, but ultimately there are 58 district attorneys' offices and several hundred police departments and sheriff's offices. And the state of California, the law enforcement structure in the state of California does depend on local law enforcement fulfilling their responsibilities. So while it's important that we have the hate crimes coordinator at Attorney General Bonta's office and 8338 no hate to collect that information to be able to do something with it, that's really at a state level. And that's an important backstop, but I don't know that it's the first line of defense, right? You've really got local DAs, local prosecutors, local police and sheriffs who are constitutionally responsible for addressing violence in their own communities. And it's really important. And many local governments are doing this very well. So this is not an indictment. But I know that sort of as we evolve this discussion, the Golden State Plan is great, and it's a plan. And then how do we put it into practice? And part of that is, should local governments really be adopting their own versions of these things? And should local governments really be focusing on hate crimes in their own communities? I think the answer is yes. Let me not leave that as an open question. Yes, they should. And so that's part of, has to be part of the strategy for law enforcement and community safety.
Thanks, Jason. And I'll add to that, you mentioned our local law enforcement. The district attorney's offices are a key part of this. Our organization and the LA Jewish Federation and other partners up and down the state are working with district attorney's offices to make sure that the laws are implemented when anti-Semitic incidents occur. And we've gotten a lot of questions about what happened on the Golden Gate Bridge and across the state on our highways. That's the responsibility largely of the district attorney's office to prosecute after those arrests have happened. I know that there were at least 30 arrests in the Bay Area yesterday. So it's really important that we bring this to the attention on a regular basis to our DA's offices and make sure that we as a community are partnering with them, but also some accountability to make sure that those are happening.
Hey, Ty, can I just add one thing on that? This is outside of a straight anti-Semitism context, but law enforcement across the state of California, I think they're under-resourced. And the governor a few years ago provided almost $300 million in direct grants to local DA's offices and police departments to increase enforcement and vertical prosecution, complex prosecution. The idea there is that if you have under-resourced law enforcement, there aren't going to be consequences for crimes. So you can classify things as crimes. We can have all of the hotlines we want to collect information. But if you're not seeing the throughput from investigation to arrest to prosecution, there really isn't a promise of public safety. So that was part of why the governor did these $300-ish million in grants, a little bit less. And those dollars are all out in community. And they went to red counties and blue counties and inland counties and coastal counties. And it was really about making sure that every place in California felt that they were supported in having enough cops and prosecutors to do the job that they're constitutionally responsible for doing. So it's not exactly an anti-Semitism context, but it really is about bolstering local law enforcement efforts.
Thanks, Jason. Anita, let's move to you. Another area of the plan that we haven't talked about yet is the California-Israel relationship. Now more important than ever, in my opinion. So I'm hoping you could detail the plans outline around that and why you see that as critical for our community.
The relationship between the United States and Israel is critical. It's the United States, one of its closest allies, obviously. I just came back from a trip to Israel with a number of congressional delegations, and we had some senators. It's an extremely important relationship. And of course, the California-Israel relationship is also critical because both California and Israel profoundly benefit. We already have a long-standing set of collaborations that have been very successful between California and Israel in agriculture, in technology, in medical care. Many of our California institutions also have very close relationships with Israeli institutions. I've been very involved in setting up collaborations between Tel Aviv University and Stanford, Tel Aviv University and University of California, Berkeley, other institutions that are really moving this world in a better direction. So it's a great benefit. The California legislature, the leadership of California for years, including our current governor, have been in the leadership of working closely with Israel to benefit Californians as well as the rest of the world. So we expect that to continue. It really elevates the role of Israel in the world and its important contributions to the world. And we're very impressed with the support, unwavering support of the governor and the legislature.
Thanks, Anita. So let's do one last question to each of you. This is a public-private community partnership in not only having the plan, but implementing the plan, building on the plan in the months and years ahead. So we have hundreds of community members watching, wondering that what they can do to support you and the governor, David to support you in JPAC, and to support our colleagues at the Legislative Jewish Caucus that are going to hop on in a moment in implementing the plan and ensuring our state continues to be a great place for Jewish families to thrive. What can and should folks be doing right now? This is your softball. David, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ty. So I've mentioned a couple of the bills we're working on, but they are just part of a robust anti-Semitism bill package that we're working on with the Jewish Caucus that will make a material difference in all of the sectors of society where we're experiencing anti-Semitism, in our schools, campuses, synagogues, communities, and online, all the different areas we've already discussed today. And now that this plan is announced, we have work to do to make this a priority for our legislators and make sure the governor's roadmap is implemented throughout society. There is no better way to do this than to show up in Sacramento on May 14th and 15th for JPAC Capital Summit. We're expecting 500 Jewish community leaders from across the state to convene for this policy conference, and then a really intentional and intense lobbying experience with all of the legislature. It is incredibly fun and empowering for all of our participants, but it also makes a huge impact on our legislators when we take time off work and school, when we show up in mass and we let them know that these issues are a top priority for us. So May 14th and 15th, you can go to the JPAC website and register now. I really look forward to seeing all of you in Sacramento.
And I'll add that we have a number of amazing questions that we're obviously not going to be able to get to by the end of this, but we're going to have specific sessions at the JPAC Summit where we're going to drill into issues like public education, higher education, hate crimes, things like that. So we're going to do a much deeper dive in Sacramento with the legislators, with folks from the governor's team. So again, would encourage everybody to join us. Anita, over to you.
I just want to make a comment about JPAC and about the summit. The California legislature was founded in what year? 1849. We didn't have a Jewish caucus until of any consequence until the last maybe 5-8 years. We didn't have a JPAC that's as powerful and as unified, that has so many different organizations a part of it until the last few years. Why? You know, we went 170 years with no major voice because the situation has changed. We're called upon to suit up and to show up and to take a position. If we feel strongly, we think that anti-Semitism and the deterioration of society we see now is of urgent importance, then it's really important that we have a show of force in Sacramento. And I want to commend David also, who's joined us relatively recently, but really built up a real strong voice of the organized Jewish community in collaboration with many allies and other diversity groups in common cause. And that couldn't be more important. That creates the preconditions for us to do all of this work, including implementation of the Golden State Plan. So thank you, and I do hope everybody will come to Sacramento, especially this year.
Amen. In a moment, we're going to turn it over to our two co-chairs of the Legislative Jewish Caucus. So the last word goes to you, Jason. What do you need in this partnership from the Jewish community moving forward?
There's a lot of pressure because now I see Senator Wiener and Assemblymember Gabriel on, and I was, able to speak freely, but now I'm being monitored by our Jewish caucus and budget chair. So this is a lot more stressful than the previous 50 minutes have been. But I'll say, hello, gentlemen. Good to see you both. I will say, in addition to holding us accountable for everything that we've committed to do in the Golden State Plan, which I fully expect this community and its leaders to do, I'll also echo something that we've sort of touched on a little bit throughout this last hour, part in combating anti-Semitism. So in addition to everything that we're committing to do and being held accountable for that, what can local governments do to address anti-Semitic violence in their own communities and prevent it from occurring in the first place? I'll go to the task force that Anita, or the commission that Anita is running right now, which is around Holocaust and genocide education. Ultimately, the state can and will make sure that there is a model curriculum for Holocaust and genocide education. It is already a constitutional mandate that that's taught in the schools. But there are 1,000 local education agencies around the state of California. So what can community members, community leaders, lay leaders do to ensure that all 1,000 of those school districts, in partnership with the state leadership that's coming from the top, where's the grassroots support to push local school boards to focus on this in the proper way? Local city councils, same question, around prioritizing the safety of synagogues and houses of worship across the spectrum. So there really is a local component and a state leadership component. And I think where those two meet is really where we'll be able to make a lot of progress. And other than that, just tell Senator Wiener and Assemblymember Gabriel whatever you need, and they've promised to make everything come true in terms of hopes and dreams. So with that, thank you very much to JCRC, JPAC, and everybody for putting this together today.
Jason, thank you for this wonderful partnership. David, Anita, thank you for your community leadership. And without further ado, we're going to have our Legislative Jewish Caucus co-chairs wrap this up. Senator Scott Wiener, Assemblymember Jesse Gabriel, thank you so much for joining us. Please take it away.
I'll defer to my taller, more senior colleague.
Thank you. My shirt is a little shimmery on Zoom, so I apologize if it's distracting at all. It shimmers. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. And first, I want to thank JPAC and JCRC and the entire really incredible coalition of Jewish community organizations who have always played a powerful role statewide and in the Capitol, but particularly in the last 6+ months since the October 7th massacre, with the ensuing just this horrific war and everything that's been happening in California on our campuses, our city council chambers, at school boards, in the community. It's been a really scary time for our community and for a lot of people. And JPAC, JCRC, and so many Jewish community organizations just been doing yeoman's work. And so I am so grateful. I'm grateful for our Jewish caucus, for Mr. Gabriel, my co-chair, but also for all of our members. And we have, I believe we're 19 members now, and our Jewish and Jewish adjacent members of the legislature have been just very active and deeply engaged, even more so than usual. And it's been incredible to work as a team. And I also just really want to acknowledge and thank the governor, who's always been a tremendous ally to the Jewish community for many, many years. But since October 7th has really stepped up, sent clear signals of support early on for supporting Jews, supporting Israel, and has just really been a tremendous ally. And I'm so grateful for the Golden State Plan that he released and for his collaboration with our caucus with community leaders on that plan. I think it's a strong plan. It makes some very, very strong and clear commitments and builds on the work that the governor and the legislature have been doing for a number of years. I also just want to really just sort of say, first of all, we're looking forward to seeing everyone during the JPAC lobby day. I also just want to just sort of acknowledge that we've, there's a lot of scarring in the community now, and I think particularly between the Jewish and Muslim and Arab communities. And there's been so much beautiful work among these communities in California for so many years. We're going through an incredibly hard time. And I pray that this war ends quickly. I pray that we can move towards peace as quickly as possible. And we have so much work to do here in California to rebuild relationships that have been very, very, very strained, because it's important for all of us to work together. And the hatred that we're not the only community that experiences hatred, and we need to all be able to link arms to fight against bigotry. So thank you so much.
Go forward, Assemblymember.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ty. As usual, Senator Wiener said it beautifully, and I agree with everything. Let me just add a few thanks to the course. First of all, thank you, Jason, and thank you to the governor. The governor has just been an incredible ally for our Jewish community, probably in ways that are visible to folks, and just standing with us in so many critical moments. And Jason has been at the tip of the spear on doing a lot of that work. And I just, as not even as a legislator, but as a father, as a resident of the state of California, I just want you to know how much we appreciate Governor Newsom's allyship and leadership, and yours as well, Jason. And let me also thank Ty and David and Anita, and I know Rabbi Farkas was on, for your incredible leadership. Our community is just really lucky to have you working here in Sacramento, the work you're doing locally and around the state, and we're just really, really grateful for you. And we would not be able to accomplish what we want to accomplish as a caucus without this incredible partnership. Look, I think Scott said it well. It's obviously been an incredibly challenging and difficult couple of months for our community. The way that all of you are feeling on edge, please know that we are feeling the same way in the caucus. The way that you are focused on the challenges ahead, we are focused on them. And the only thing I would add to what Scott has said is, this is a moment where we need more folks to get in the game, where we need more folks to suit up and be involved in the policymaking process. And it's not enough to read something in the newspaper and be outraged. It's not enough to watch something on TV and get frustrated. We need you to lend your voice to the policymaking process. So I cannot emphasize strongly enough how important it is that folks come up for the JPAC Lobby Day, how important it is that people get involved. All of the organizations that are part of JPAC are wonderful community organizations, but we need more. They need more people, and we need more people. We need more folks to be involved. So bring a friend, bring 2 friends, bring 3 friends, but please come and support us, because we need that. And what gives me hope at this moment, and which has been a challenging moment, is that we've been doing this for 400 generations. Our community has been through a lot of tough times before. We're an incredibly resilient people. And the way that we're going to continue to move through this complicated moment is by what we've always done, by staying true to our values, by showing up for each other, by showing up for other communities, because that continues to remain important. In the way that we can stand in solidarity and support each other, we will get through this moment. So thank you for having me. Thank you. I know I'm preaching to the choir for those of you that are on this call, but if you can go and talk to your friends, talk to people in your community, get them to come up to Sacramento, get them to meet with their legislators in their districts, that is critical work in this moment. And I know with Governor Newsom's leadership and with the incredible community leaders we have here, we're going to be able to make some real progress for our community.
Thank you, Assemblymember Gabriel, Senator Wiener. You both have been amazing partners. It was such an honor to go to Israel with both of you a couple months ago, where we bared witness, and with many of your colleagues. We really appreciate you taking the time to do that. At the risk of this sounding like a timeshare presentation, come with us to Sacramento. We need you this year. We've been firefighters for the past 7 months, putting out fires left and right. The way we go into fire prevention mode and stop them from happening in the first place is policy change. It's advancing the Golden State Plan. And in order to do that, we all need to make our voices heard. I'm sure the senator and Assemblymember will agree. When they see constituents in Sacramento making the drive or making the flight, it really does count. And so that's our call to action today. We will send a follow-up email with all the information on how you can. David, maybe I'll throw in a little discount in there to throw something in the mix. But just on behalf of all of us in the JPAC coalition, thank you for leaning in, and we look forward to seeing you in Sacramento next month. Have a great day, everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you.